The sea was calm, almost silent. A massive oil tanker moved slowly through the northern waters of the Persian Gulf, its engines humming steadily as it followed its route. For a moment, everything seemed routine. Then, the sky lit up. A missile tore across the horizon at terrifying speed and slammed directly into the tanker. Within seconds, flames erupted from the ship's deck and thick black smoke began rising high into the air. The explosion echoed across the water, sending shockwaves through the surrounding sea lanes. But the real reaction was happening just a few miles away. An American aircraft carrier strike group, already operating in the region, immediately detected the launch. Inside the carrier's command center, alarms began to sound. Radar operators confirmed the trajectory of the missile, and within seconds, the order was given: full combat alert. Across the carrier and its escort ships, the atmosphere changed instantly. Sailors and soldiers rushed toward their assigned positions. Weapons lockers were opened, and equipment was rapidly distributed to the crews. On the decks of the escort ships, heavy armored panels slid open as the vertical launch systems activated. Moments later, Tomahawk cruise missiles blasted out of their launch cells one after another. Their engines ignited as they climbed into the sky, curving toward their designated targets hundreds of miles away. The strike group had begun its response. Along the outer edges of the carrier, machine gun crews moved into position. Long belts of ammunition were fed into the receivers of mounted weapons. The metallic clack of charging handles echoed across the deck as each gun was prepared for combat. Once the weapons were loaded, gunners fired short bursts into open water to test their systems. Brass casings rattled across the metal deck, while the crews checked feeding, cycling, and firing speed. Every weapon had to be ready. Above them, snipers climbed onto elevated platforms along the carrier superstructure. They set up their rifles carefully and began scanning the surrounding sea through high-powered scopes. Every movement on the water was tracked. Every distant object was watched. No threat would go unnoticed. Meanwhile, on the lower decks of the carrier, groups of Marines were gathering for an urgent briefing. Fully equipped with rifles, body armor, ammunition, and combat packs, they stood in tight formations as an officer quickly explained the mission. Allied bases across the Middle East were requesting immediate reinforcement. Intelligence suggested that further strikes could follow, and ground forces needed to be ready. The Marines would be deployed immediately. The briefing lasted only a few minutes. There was no time to waste. Back above the flight deck, preparations were already underway for the carrier's aircraft. Mechanics worked quickly around rows of fighter jets, running through final inspections. Missiles were secured onto wing pylons, fuel tanks were filled, and electronic systems were tested. Once everything was cleared, the first aircraft rolled forward onto the deck. It was an AV-8B Harrier. The pilot pushed the throttle forward, the jet accelerating down the short runway before lifting into the air and climbing rapidly into the sky. Seconds later, more aircraft followed. A-18 Super Hornets rolled into position one after another. Each jet was attached to the carrier's powerful catapult system. Engines roared at full power as the catapult launched the aircraft forward at incredible speed. Within seconds, each jet disappeared into the sky. Their objectives were clear. First, they needed to intercept and destroy any incoming missiles that could be targeting the carrier group. Second, they had to establish air superiority in the surrounding airspace, ensuring that transport aircraft could safely reach their destinations. And third, they were tasked with striking enemy radar stations, missile launchers, and command centers that posed a threat to coalition forces in the region. Back on the flight deck, the Marines were already moving toward a row of V-22 Osprey aircraft waiting nearby. The rear ramps were lowered as the Marines boarded in single file, securing themselves into their seats. Within moments, the engines roared to life. The massive rotors began spinning, first slowly, then faster, until they blurred into motion. One by one, the Ospreys lifted vertically off the deck like helicopters. As they gained speed, the rotors tilted forward and the aircraft transitioned into forward flight. They headed toward Allied bases hundreds of miles away. Not far behind them, another group of Marines boarded a transport helicopter loaded with additional equipment and supplies. The helicopter lifted off and joined the formation, following the same route across the sea. Escort helicopters soon followed. Armed with door-mounted machine guns, their crews carefully scanned the skies around the transport aircraft. If hostile drones or aircraft appeared along the route, the gunners were ready to engage immediately. Back at sea, the carrier strike group remained on maximum alert. Radar systems continued sweeping the skies and ocean surface. Machine gun crews stayed at their posts. Missile teams kept their launch systems locked onto potential threats. And on the flight deck, more fighter jets stood ready, with engines warmed and weapons armed. Because in modern naval warfare, the next threat can appear without warning, and when it does, every second matters.